works. So I think what I'm trying to share with you is going to be quite helpful and quite fun. And so her illustration she opens up with is a business school challenge. What I'm trying to share with you is a business school session where what they do is they would have a series of um, items that they could take. So the teams were put together and they're saying you're going to be, um, like on a plane wreck in the jungles of somewhere. And the goal, or in the conversation, the goal for the group is you've got all these things you can choose from, but you can only take like 7. Maybe they have 20 items. And what she says happens every time with these students is they all get together and they start debating and they all collect things. And what you find is they have an eclectic mishmash of things because they never define their goal. So if you define your goal is to survive, for example, until someone comes and um, if someone comes and shows up in that jungle setting and the goal is to stay put for them to find you, what you would need is going to be a little different game than if you're going to make your way out. Also, depending on the area you're in, that may affect it. But what she points out is the biggest problem, and that's what I want to talk to you about, is they never determine their goal. They never get in their mind exactly what they're trying to do. So that's what I want to share with you. I want to help you think. There are 5 little pieces here about goals that I want you to understand, because I think most of what we do is that we're sloppy about goals. We don't set them well. And the fact is, you're not getting anything done without a goal. You do them all day long. It might be what you're going to buy at the grocery store. It's what you're trying to get through with math. It's what you're trying to teach the kids as to their character. It doesn't matter. There's still an orientation of some kind of goal, but if we're sloppy with this, it really, I mean, really, like really interferes with our success. It can really hurt us. An example I also want to throw out is I was talking to a friend of mine. She's recently, well, within the past year, has been widowed, and we were talking, and she was describing her current house, and it's needs to be redone and sold, and it's too big, and she doesn't have great memories there, and so there's a lot going on, and she's described to me she doesn't want to be in the house, and so she's coming up with some options that are uh, maybe not on target, maybe about what to do, but what I got her to start thinking about is, what do you want? She started describing me what she wanted. I want a smaller house, maybe, a condo or whatever it is. Maybe it's a bedroom, maybe it's 2, but manageable and bright. This was a thing. She said bright. And so I said, you ought to get a folder and start collecting that. What do you want? What can you afford? What are you interested in? Where might it be? And how would it be decorated? And what would you have in it? And start getting a vision of what you want, because that actually will help her more than anything else. And I want to explain why. So this is kind of the first point. If we are doing a poor job with goals, it starts with that we don't define them at all. We just sort of default them, not define them. So we're not being clear. So if we haven't actually said what the goal is and haven't articulated it as a specific goal, we're already in trouble. Just like those business students, like, in the jungle analogy or example, if we do that sort of thing and we haven't defined the goal, we're already in trouble. But there's kind of a second point. So first is don't define them at all. Second is we don't define them well. And this is kind of the crux of what I want to talk about, because if you define a goal well, it's going to help you dramatically. If you define it poorly, you have it, and that's better than a poke in the eye with a stick, as we say in Texas, but it's not going to help you the way you want it to. So if you define them poorly, it works like this. You're defining them poorly because you don't understand the distinction between a don't and a do. And so what we'll do is we'll have don't goals and what we need are do goals. So if you will pay attention, this is why I'm bringing it up. I run into this all the time as I talk to people, interact, coach, counsel, etc. People, for some reason, have this orientation to talk about what they don't want. And when you do that, it has some problems. So don't define them well moves into two other issues. The third is, well, it's actually three. The third is it demotivates. The fourth is it distracts. And the fifth is it creates daffy planning. So I'm going to talk about all these together. But it works like this, that if you define a goal as a don't, you're in avoidance mode. And avoidance mode generally, and I'm not saying there are not times to do it, but generally it turns what you're working on into a chore. And if you do that to your kids, it's going to be the same thing. If you keep shooting at them don'ts, it converts, instead of a real aspirational goal that kind of, gets you there, it motivates you. These kind demotivate you. It's a don't. And as a result, it generates not the pull of an exciting goal, but the frustration of just having to get the chore done. So when you frame them as what you want rather than what you don't want, it tends to help kick in the right kind of motivation for yourself and for others. It's also a distraction when you use don't, because don't means you're actually focused on the wrong thing. So I remember this forever ago, and I practiced it on walking on walls and balance beams or whatever. I don't know where I ran across this illustration years ago, but they said the way to walk across a balance beam or like on a wall or anything is, what you want to focus on is the end of the bar or the end of the wall, and you focus on that and you walk towards it. As opposed to, if you get caught up thinking, don't fall off, don't fall off. If you are on a wall or a balance beam and you're thinking, don't fall off, then what you're focused on is falling off. And so the actual goal is going to be more focused on falling off, not falling off. In the Bible, it kind of goes this way. We can get caught up in saying, don't sin. But the real solution is do good, do righteousness, pursue that. And by its nature, you take care of the don't. And I guess that's what I want to stress to you, to start tuning into your language and notice how often you say don't, how it tends to demotivate, how it tends to distract because you're focused on the wrong thing. And then fifth there, it leads to daffy planning. I had to stick with D's, right? So daffy planning, because when you have a don't, it's hard to plan your steps to make it happen. It's not near as easy, because a don't can be solved in a lot of different ways, whereas a do, what you want, is a thing you'll know when you have it. So let me go through some examples. So when you say don't fight, if you say don't fight, well, how can that goal be reached of not fighting among your kids? And the answer is, well, one could be gone. One could be taped up or something. It could be a neighbor's house. They could just have their separate rooms and their separate stuff. And that will get you to don't fight. However, what we want to ask is, what do you want? What do you really want? Is that really what you want? Just don't fight? Because I'm going to argue what you want is them to cooperate. You want them to grow close. You want them to be good, close siblings for the rest of their life. That's what you want. And when you think about, how do I help them cooperate and work together and love each other and support each other, your plan is going to be very different than a plan of don't fight. And that's sort of the game. And honestly, all these examples are that way. Don't dawdle. You're wasting time. Quit looking at the sky. Stop. Don't. Well, what do you really want them to do? You really want them to finish their math. Let's say it's math. It's always math. Finish your math. And so focus on that. How do I help you finish your math? Have a timer, have a deadline, make it stop. You have to do it in the afternoon if you don't finish. Get motivated, get this done. Hey, we're going out to eat, or we're going to the park, as soon as you get your math done. Ooh, that's different than don't dawdle. Then they could look busy, maybe not dawdle, maybe actually semi work on it, but it's not focused on getting it done. Don't miss any problems. There's a fun one. Um, uh, don't miss any problems. So perfectionism thing. Don't mess up. Don't make mistakes. That kind of thing. Don't misspell. I don't want to misspell anything. Well, you can solve that. That would invite you. Spelling's a chore now, and it would invite you to stay within a boundary of words or something, rather than I want you to learn to spell more words. We have a goal of you becoming a good speller. So you teach them, at least the way we like you to teach them, is to not guess. And so the goal is to quit guessing so you can learn how to spell words, and use words you like. Don't get upset. Well, there we are, focused on being upset. Upset's a bad thing, etc. That's not a do goal, that's a don't goal. A do goal would be, let's learn how to process things. Let's learn how to manage how we feel about things. Let's make use of what the upset's about, because it's probably teaching us something so we can get to something else. Don't make enemies. Wrote that one down. Yeah. So that's quite different than make friends. Okay. So don't make enemies. You're focused on enemies and the edge. And then I thought about this, and goes with it. Don't overeat. If you think about don't overeat, then you're at the edge, focused on what's the edge of overeating, as opposed to what do you really want? I want to eat well, or I want to eat properly. I want to eat enough. I want to eat the right amount. I want to eat so I'm trimmer. I don't know. But that kind of goal, when you set it and organize yourself to it, works way better than a don't and a don't and a don't. So again, what we're talking about is we don't define them at all. We don't define them well, because we're not asking really what we want. We get into that do and don't attitude or orientation. Third, it tends to demotivate. Fourth thing I want you to know is it distracts, because we get on the wrong focus, especially when we're sloppy with goals this way. And then the planning's daffy. We can't really organize the plan for what we want. So begin with that, figure out what you want, but get out of the don'ts. That's I guess the emphasis I would have, to get out of the don'ts, get into the do, and pay attention to how often you do this. You'll be shocked how often you're saying it. Don't do this, don't do that, don't do this. And I know you're a parent, we get into it, but even invite your kids to help you to begin to think clearly about what do I want? What do I want? I don't want us to fight at dinner. I'm making up something, but it's like holidays. That's different than I want us to enjoy dinner, get along. Well, how can I get us to get along? So we would play the anything game or something like that. We wouldn't talk about serious issues there, but it was part of the strategy to get to fun. We might tell fun stories, or one of the things I used to do is, I've done this in groups too. I get everybody, I'll make up some little sheets with items in it, little tearaways, just little cards or whatever. And it might say lamp, and it might say basketball, and it might say ant, and it might say, another one might be chewing gum. It doesn't matter. So randomly, let everybody pick one, and then go around and tell a funny story that reminds you of, or a fun story, or some story. And those sharing of stories, and especially the humorous ones, tend to bond people together. We tend to get something fun out of it. That would come as a goal, to have a good time together. That may not sound fun to you, but it was fun to us. A good time together, rather than don't argue or conflict or whatever at the table. All right. So I want to know about your questions. I did get one sent to me that I want to make sure I address, but what I'm hoping you'll do is share your questions. I didn't do a good job of saying, hey, are we live? Can you see us? What's happening? That kind of stuff. So I'll do it now. Are we live? Can you see us? Where are you? Sometimes we're down under, sometimes we're in the UK. Sometimes you're next door in Texas. And I hope this is our recording because I would feel just awful if I'd said all those words and not much else. So, all right. So I see Zeta. She says good morning. I'll say good morning too. So what kind of questions you have? It could be about that, about goals. I mean, I just kind of went over it. And then, the lesson is really try to catch on to frame what you want in terms of what you do want, not what you don't want, right? So, we would want our kids to say, yes, ma'am, yes, sir, we're Southerners, right? So, not argue, whatever. It wasn't about that. It was about yes. It was yes, my liege. But helping your kids understand what you do want is dramatic for them. Most of them actually probably want to do a better job, but if we're not giving them a good direction, it doesn't work. Jeannie from Northern California, good to be here. Good to have you here. I know y'all have had some challenges with rain and politics, but at least in Texas, that's what it sounds like to us. But hope you're doing well. So, questions. What kind of questions about homeschooling do you have? I'm looking up this one. I've got it. So, socialization I want to address, but quite interested and open to any others. Here we go. And by the way, Jody is on her way back. She's been on a cruise for a week, so she'll be here today, but not in time. So I got this question from Lorraine. Oh, I apologize. These chats don't let you put that much in there. So what, let me read it to you and I'll try to, maybe I can copy one little piece of it. But what Lorraine wrote us was, hope you're doing well. Would love to get information about kids socializing. We have listened to your talk about regular meetups with friends and creating friendships. So we just want to ask questions around that. So our kids are 7 and 9. So, think about 7-year-old, 9-year-old. They do sports most days of the week, but that's not really creative playing with their best friends, okay, or their best friend. They also attend church on Wednesday nights and Sundays, and then homeschool group once a week where they get to play with lots of different friends as well as their best friends. We also have people over for meals, but it's not always the families of their friends, but rather mom and dad's friends with smaller kids. How much socializing do kids need with their friends at these ages, and how often? And does any socializing count, even if it's not always with their best friend? And then she adds, thanks heaps, kind regards. So there's the two essential questions to see if they get in there. How much socializing do kids need with their friends at these ages, and how often? So here's an interesting thing I would like to stress up front. They've done some challenging, insightful studies about kids, especially like growing up, whether they sort of stay in church or whether they bail out. And what they found, there's a lot of conversation nowadays about church hurt, and that's the problem. People have been damaged and hurt by bad things in churches, and I'm not saying that's not true. But what they found in terms of people actually staying with churches and maintain their faith into adulthood and for their kids is the highest correlation that I'm aware of is when kids actually worship and are engaged in ministry or activity, excuse me, with different age groups, not their own. It's difference. It's with older, with adults, and with younger, etc. That there's something that connects the whole community together better. Plus, you're going to get some wisdom, older people have wisdom, younger people have energy. Older people need to be energized, and younger people need some sanity. So, so what they found is, like, if worship is a combination of ages, and maybe even the music, has some variation in it, or the activities, or the things, that combination of ages tends to create a greater sense of understanding about the community. And you can imagine a lot uh, more talent in your socializing skills, because you learn how to interact. I'm telling you, even when you're 9, learning how to interact with a 2-year-old toddler, got to, be careful with them. You don't just really, for them, don't snatch things away. They'll have a conniption. But all those experiences working with a toddler, even when you're 9, is a big deal. Or how you interact with older adults is a big deal. So I would not say you don't want to play with your friends or your best friends or people your age or whatever who you connect with. But I would say I wouldn't define socializing that way. Socializing really means learning how to be social and interact with a variety. You really want a skill set. So it's a flexibility. It's a social adaptability. It's not just your group. And that's, I think, the crux of it. So everything Lorraine's describing to me sounds like she's on target. And when you're on target that way, I just stick with it. Now, there's another piece, is she has 2 kids, so it seems like they would be playing together some too. So that's socializing as well. It's the only child that doesn't get learn how to share as easily, or get the socialization. So I think all these things play in. I don't know. I'm not sure what Lorraine means by creative. It sounds like imaginary or imagination, that kind of fun stuff. But those things can happen too, and as they age. But I suppose, for us, we made a decision with 5 kids not to do sports all the time. And I'm not saying she is doing that. I don't really know, but she did say every day. So you got to think through all these activities, because with 5 children, we simply couldn't pull it off. And especially if I and Jody were expected to be at everything, we couldn't do that. The kids had to understand, we do some, but we have a whole bunch of us, and we, do what we can. But the goal isn't, we're not going to be at every single event. We're going to prioritize and see about the important ones, but we also pull back some so they could be together, be with their friends, have some semblance of some sanity in life, and not make it a go, 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 go. Because the big trick to friendship, at least in my humble opinion, is simply repeating time with people, like over and over and over again. So the more time you spend with someone, not not 6 hours in a day, but a number of events, even an hour a week over 6 weeks, is a very different set of experiences that deepen the friendship. So it's more like just exposure and hang. I don't know how to say it. I was reading a question. Um, it's exposure, and any kind of socializing does count, I think. And I think you really want variation. Now, I'll say this. And I've mentioned this before, I read an essay by a guy named Fenelon, some French dude back in, I don't know, 1500s, who was like the tutor to the king's kids or something like that. And in his correspondence, one of his correspondence with people, he talked about not having a best friend, because best friends generally create jealousy and conflict. And I've seen that to be true with adults, that I know of a couple that the 2 wives were very close, And one of the wives got very convicted about how much time she was spending with her girlfriend and decided she needed to back off and spend more time with her husband. And when she did that, the girlfriend got insulted, dramatically insulted, and it created all kinds of conflict. So even in those relationships, because the expectation. So what we would say is not that you can't have a best friend. We just said you can't have just one. One, just two or three best friends. And over the line, it looked like that worked really well. It looked like I haven't talked to the kids about their perspective now, but that was the idea. So anyway, I hope that's helpful. So let me see what else we got. Jenny says we are selective in choosing friends. Okay, that's incredibly fair. We are selective in choosing friends. It's a little hard to find a group of same beliefs in the state where we live. It is something we can't be compromised either. Otherwise, kids' belief and perception will be influenced by. My children have only limited number of friends for that reason. I learned family is the most important place to socialize, so I dress and train them a lot there, but it often is a struggle. My older one is turning 13. I'm just wondering where she'll learn leadership skills among people. Yeah, and so it is a challenge, especially younger children. You definitely want to be. I mean, the way we say it is you'll never be like the people you don't hang around. So the quality of your friendships are a big deal, a huge influence on your life, huge. And yet, you're kind of caught in this world because you still have to go out and interact and, especially interact with people of different faiths and beliefs, or maybe just nuance of beliefs. Sometimes Baptists have to learn how to get along with Methodists, that kind of thing. So it's, it's not exactly tricky as long as you start thinking about principles. But like a 13-year-old, when Jeannie says she has a 13-year-old child, that child's going to want to, as she moves to adulthood, start developing some friends a little broader. And when if she goes to college or she goes to work or something, she's still going to be around people. So learning how to interact with people that don't share the same beliefs is part of the training. And so having exposure to them, I'd say, in their teens, especially, do their friends have to be perfect? We're going to go no. Do you want to steer them away from having friendships with hoodlums? Yes. And so, just like us, we're all wrestling with that kind of thing, want to build friendships with good people. But, honestly, we need the book. I'm not okay. You're not okay, but that's okay. Or the bumper sticker, dysfunction is not a competition, because we are in a world that's messy. And most of the people, if you'll, assume that the person you're meeting or talking to is probably hurting, you're probably going to be right. If you're going to look at them and say, I bet they had something tough in their background, I bet you're right. I think that's just the nature of how our culture and world has gone. Part of that's complexity, part of it's bad people, part of it's good people. I don't know. It's all kinds of stuff. But maintaining that mindset of we're trying to raise happy adults, so we're trying to get you equipped, and it's not just isolation, but it is wise and cautious interaction. It's not just anybody will do, but you don't want to do that any more than you'd want to say I'll just marry anybody. It's not that. You want to be picky, but not so picky that you don't even get along with yourself, So anyway, I don't know that there are really great rules for us exactly. I do think there are principles, and the principles in friendship are going to be people that you share affinity with. Some people you're going to like more than others. I think that's great. Some people are good for you. Some people are bad for you. You can watch that with your kids and yourself. Some people don't bring out the best in you. I'm not sure that's a good match. People that bring out the best in you, that can challenge. Usually it's people that are interested in growth, and care or have similar key values. Somebody who you value family and they value a single jet set party lifestyle, that's going to be really hard to build a friendship around. So there's this, attraction piece, just like in towards marriage, attraction piece. And then second, there is do we have a basis for a relationship? Is it a match? And so those things work in friendships, they work in relationships, and you want to build on them. So I think I've jabbered too long on that, but that's some of the key, I think, of how you want to think about it. A lot of y'all, if you sign up on our site, can't remember if it's included, but somewhere in there, if you have a copy of Glane, the book I wrote on relationships, it's probably worth the read, especially I'd say when a daughter gets 13 or son 14. It deals with, there's some things mentioned, but there's nothing bad in there, but it sets them up on a good path of understanding how relationships work. So you might check that out. So what other questions? What other questions are on your mind? I know I have some generic questions that I like to go over from time to time. But if you'll type a question, I'll give you my best shot at telling you some things you could think about. That would be golden. So, homeschooling, as we think about it, is this? It's an interesting notion because technically all schooling is homeschooling, and everybody's homeschooling anyway. It's not near the unusual thing it is. That the unusual thing is actually the schooling. That's the strange thing. Um, that throughout history and just the normal structure of the game, we wouldn't normally think of sending our kids off every day to something else. But as our culture's grown and how we began to think about education, never mind Dewey and whatever else is out there, we got away from actually just the sane common sense way of thinking about things. And the sane common sense way to think about things is that, the home is the learning environment. The kids are going to be there much more. Your influence is much more powerful. There's much more connection inside that system than out there. And so what we know is the homes that are supportive of their kids, even that are in mass education situations, private or public school, those kids just do better. I mean, by and large, which you would expect because you've got the right game in play. But the unique thing about the home is it overlaps the values, standards, wisdom, lessons, and they operate in real time. One of my favorite things to do was if there was something going on, uh, not necessarily a crisis, but a challenge for the kids, that was, kind of what you'd call a teachable moment. And so we might all learn from it. If there's something going on, it might not be all the kids. Like if it was a boy thing, it'd be just the boys, or if it was just a girl thing, I might be involved, might not, might be mom and Laura, might be the three of us, something like that. But it was, it's in that home, everything is education, everything is learning. And when you broaden your mindset that way, I mean, you can get in a ditch and pretend like, oh, we're just going to hang out as family and that's learning. And they really don't get decent at reading or math or whatever. That's not what I would say we're aiming for. But so that's one extreme. But it's that combination of all the learning and all the character stuff and all the values and what you get to model to them. It's not this artificial environment where we're trying to, make them sit in their desks, learn what we need them to learn, behave like they need to behave, and have specialist teachers pulling it off. That's not good for either generation. In fact, homeschoolers, moms and dads just get to learn dramatic things because they're learning along with the kids. So yet another bonus. But I just want to invite you to keep thinking about how broader education is than just the studies. And yet at the same time, don't dismiss the study part. It's that combination because, as we'd say, the goal is to grow happy adults. And that's part of the trick. So let me shift back here. All right, so let's see. Perception, train them. So I just returned turned 13 this week. I just turned 13 this week. Was always worried about his social, I guess my son, social skills, just because other people has reminded me. But is there anything that I can do as a mom to help have a good teenager? Yeah, so I mean, part of it is I hope dad's around. So the most strategic thing you can do to have a good teenager is to have a good relationship with the teen's dad or mom. And even if divorce is in there, that relationship, look, I'm just telling you, the relationship mom and dad is where the leverage is. When they see mom and dad doing well, they feel safe. There's a lot that goes on. It gets modeled properly. Their standards are good. Um, However, I mean, that's the key. If you have a son and you don't have a man involved, I'd figure out a way, whether sports or a scouting type thing or something. I do think a boy needs men in his life, and I think girls need women in their lives. And I may get in all kinds of trouble, but I take a number. What do you do? So I would say that's strategic, but with teens, the biggest issue with teens, I'd say there are two. One is helping them get a vision for what they want to be. So you want to keep helping them back to the goals thing, getting an idea what kind of adult do they want to be? What kind of teen? What kind of life do they want to build? Because that orientation helps them make decisions and avoid some bad things in the process because it's going to invite them to see a particular kind of plan. So I would say that is strategic. The other thing, probably a couple more. The next thing I would say about teens is that what you're really wanting to do is to back off controlling them. So if we had a chart, it would show, they take more control and you take less control. So you move to more of a coaching, advisory position, that kind of thing. And it's not instant, there's still standards and rules. But if you parent a 16-year-old like you do a 9-year-old, you're going to really irritate some people, I promise you. Uh, and it'll be that child especially because they're moving to adulthood. So you give them more responsibility, and as you give them more responsibility, they might have some more adult consequences that go with it. But that they get into a place where they go, oh, it's my life. I've got to be responsible for this. It's not just simply always looking for you to make the decision or for them to push against you. So I would say that's particularly key, helping them set goals for the future. To this aspect of working with them in such a way that you're shifting to more of a coaching advisory role away from a controlling and deciding everything role. Um, and then if you think about it, what you really want to do is continue to improve the communication with them. So with a teen, you're wanting to invite them to communicate. You might want to share things with you. And the way you do that is that way you say, if you'd like, I'd like to share with you some thoughts. I have some thoughts about whatever the topic is, or I'd like to hear about it. If you'd like to share it, it's not making them, it's an invitation. They might take a day or two or three or a week. I don't know. But as I've said before, I have noticed that, and somebody taught me this, if at night you'll hang out with them later at night, sit on their bed, go sit in the room and just hang out some. Especially true for dads. If in a traditional sense dad's gone, but if both are gone, it's the same thing. It's all the same thing. But at night their friends are having to wind down. They're not as prone to be talking to each other. You can get them off. They're getting ready for bed, get off screens or whatever, and they'll tend to talk then. But mostly you want to invite them to converse. And one of the powerful things you can do with your kids that combine these things is to say, if it were me, blah, 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 instead of you should, you shouldn't, don't do this, do that. It's more of, if it were me, I'd be thinking this way, you know. Um, as I said earlier, I kind of said that yesterday when I was talking to this friend. I said, if it were me, I would be trying to figure out what I wanted as far as a house, and that would tell me about how to fix up my current one, sell it, etc. In that particular illustration. So let me look at some more of these comments. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. Homeschooling, good. Vision for teen you gave was a few weeks ago in the talent stack talk. So if you go back to the talent stack talk, I don't know what it is, you can search on it. I talk about that exact thing, about the importance of getting a vision for even how their skill set is going to come together to get them, the results and the happiness as adult I think they want. That would be the idea. So let's see. Jeannie said the question may sound weird, but in what ways did you systemize faith training in your homeschool? First generation Christians, and we feel lost. Okay, so I was a pastor, and I'm going to speak from a Christian orientation in terms of my experience. But her question, let me just read it again. It may sound weird. It doesn't sound weird at all. It sounds weird that you'd think it's weird. But what ways did you systematize faith training in your homeschool? So how do you do faith training? All right. So the way we would think about it is sorry, get my little screen fixed. Or that there are a combination of things. So we were involved in church, obviously, and church had between youth groups and Bible studies, and we had a program called Awana, which was a Bible memorization program, and all of our 5 kids won the Timothy Award, which means they memorized, by the time they completed the program, they'd memorized like 800 verses. So maybe a few stick. But what we did in our family, and it seems like it's on the page. If it's not, I'll put it there, of the free stuff when you sign up just to be on our, email list. How we did Bible studies. So at one time I called it Bible by questions, but it's called Question QVA. I forget. I'm sorry. It'll come to me in a moment. But what I would do is we had a weekly Bible study. So that was part of it. I mean, some of it's the literature they read. Some of it's the discussions we have, and I'll get to that in a second. But we at least had a weekly Bible study, and it was a trick with 5 kids of varying ages. So what I would do is I would design, I would find a truth that I wanted them to know, maybe a proverb, it could be anywhere, but a verse that was nailing down something. Let's say it's like a Hebrews 11:6. Okay, without faith, it's impossible to please God. For he must come to God and believe that he is. He's a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. So Hebrews 11:6. In that context, this God is a rewarder of those who seek them. You must believe that he is, right? And without faith, it's impossible to please God. So I've got those things that are in the verse. And what I would do is I would try to design a question. And I give in this study, if you sign up, I give you 42 of these. So it explains it, and it's a lesson set. And so if you go to that with our homeschool videos on it, it'll be on that page. If it's not on that page, it'll be on that page. By this afternoon. So when you think that way, and I would look at it, I'll go, okay, what kind of question could everybody interact on about without faith, it's impossible to please God, And so I might just start there and just say, okay, here's the question. How do we please God? And if I did that, I would say that, and everybody would start talking, and they'd share different things. Well, by doing good, by apologizing, and that's usually what kids would focus on, all those things. They might say believing in Jesus. Who knows? They would say these things. And then after we've talked it through, we'd go to that passage and read it, and it's like it hits you right in the face. So without faith, it's impossible to please God. So it's believe. And then we might say, whatever he says, it's believe. This is a faith conversation. That whole Hebrews 11 chapter is a whole conversation about faith. And so they would get that point, and then we'd talk about how could we all agree to apply it this week, you know? And I don't know what we'd come up with, but everybody might say, okay, I'm gonna have one verse I'm gonna practice believe and practice this week. I'll just say we made that up. Well, then everybody get their verse and try it. And that doesn't sound like much, but week in, week out, it sort of adds up. The other thing I like to do is any moment when a crisis, situation, challenge, something would happen, I would actually, when I interacted with the kids about it and what we could learn, I'd like to include a verse, a scripture. I like to appeal to some, ancient wisdom over just dad may know something, but most of what I know is from ancient wisdom. So that's the way it goes. But having that gain, having a faith community you belong to, they're going to help out. Uh, and having a way inside of the family to continue it. Now, if you like daily Bible studies, that's great. If you read daily devotions, that's super duper. Um, we certainly pray before meals. There are things like that. But for the most part, what I've found to be most powerful is having insight and giving them the opportunity to see insights about life, and coming back to the wisdom that's found in the scriptures. So I would say that's the short answer to what I did. I don't Did that get to your question? Um, so let's see. Uh, Jeannie said, especially for teenagers. I have girls. Okay. Yeah. So even there, as they age, they've got to own their own faith. And I do think there are things that, uh, probably in preparation they need to work on. So there might be some good literature on apologetics. A good book you can put in the rotation of books, some good books. You could even do books of the Bible if you're doing a homeschooling and you have them reading every day. But something about the questions people are commonly asking, learning to think through. We do this with movies. We go watch a movie, a Harry Potter movie, and then we go have nachos, and we talk about it. And we think about what do we like, what do we did, and what was good in it, what was bad. Were there any redeeming themes? Were there any things that you want to reject? So you're constantly kind of teaching them both spirituality, but a critical thinking in the process. So I guess as I look at it, and Jeannie said she found it helpful, and that's great. It's sort of I have two default concepts. Like this is like all I have. I don't have much else. And one is the golden rule. So most of what I'm trying to think about when I'm thinking is, well, do unto others. I mean, how would I want them to treat me? How should I treat them? Would I want someone to treat me that way? Would What would help me? It's that kind of orientation where I'm getting objective to try to think about it. The other thing is a principle from Galatians 6. It's articulated there. It's in the Gospels too, but it says, "You reap as you sow." So you reap as you sow. And what that means is you reap in the same kind as you sow. So if you sow to friendships, you'll reap friendships. You tend to reap more than you sow. You sow some, you get more back, just like with seeds. That's the picture, the analogy. So you get the same kind, you get more. It tends to multiply. It's also delayed. It doesn't happen immediately. So like sowing into the lives spiritually, you keep doing it. Sowing your lives about, it doesn't matter, hygiene or wisdom or even math. It's, you get some math right every day and you keep doing that and you'll start getting more math right. It's that reap as you sow. I mean, those two things, I think that's pretty much all I got. So, um, let's say we have Christian worldview courses and other things, but the family devotionals, especially include dad, has been very hard. Um, we've been trying. Yeah, it is very hard. I didn't know how to do devotions. I never saw such thing. I was a quote pastor in a church, but that's why this um, um, uh, question. I don't know why I can't remember the name of it. Question BA application.
So this at one time it was by question, it was BBQ. So anyway, this process of having a verse, but going through questions, just discussion, come to it, and how can we apply it? It's very simple. Any dad could do it, and or any mom, and when you do it some, it's tolerable. Once a week was plenty. It doesn't mean you can't do it more often. And we'd have other things. I might have something I want to teach the kids, but for the most part, just even that much, you're going to reap as you sow. And if you can do it more, party on. But I think you'll find that particularly helpful. Anyway, so all right, this has been really great. If there's, I mean, I've got a few minutes, but if you got one last question, uh, zip it up there. And otherwise, again, I guess I would just stress that you reap as you sow. So look in these areas, even with your teenage daughters, even with the kid, all the rest, you're getting a result from what you've been doing. And that goes negative too. Like I talked about tantrums, if you hadn't seen that. You know, the reason kids have tantrums has more to do with that we sow to them having tantrums. We don't teach them a different strategy. And so if you want a different orientation of them being more respectful or better, you want to sow to that. You want to learn that thing. If you want them to clean, let's say you want them to hang a towel correctly. Okay, so why don't you have towel hanging practice? So they hang it correctly, and then you knock it, you say, okay, go out, and then you knock it down, they come back in, said, all right, do it again. And I mean, I guess it sounds cruel. I don't think it is, but once they learn how to hang a towel, they hang a towel, you know? So a lot of times it's practice, and that practice has a way of building that skill, and whatever it is. And it could be in communication, it could be in pleasantness, it could be in making their bed. It could be anything. But spirituality, practicality, wisdom, etc., it's going to be a reap as you sow. And then I would stress it's going to be a do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. I think you get a really long way with those two as far as the practical stuff. So I'm not saying there's not more, but all right. I hope this was helpful. Pass it along. We're grateful that you guys show up. And I've been putting some shorts out, and that's kind of fun. I'll do more of those. If you have any ideas for shorts, um, email me, shoot it to me. Someone said, oh, your short clip helped on what? I asked what kind of 8-year-old my little one wanted to be. I asked if she wanted to be tantrumy 8-year-old, and she's improving as she has more awareness. I think that's right. I think that's so good to hear that just asking the child, who do you want to be? What kind of person do you want to be? What kind of 8-year-old do you want to be? Is this the kind of this behavior? Is this behavior? Is this kind of person you want to be? Helping them get that vision can change everything. And for the most part, they just need a little nudge on that. So that's excellent. Awesome to hear. All right, we'll be back next week for sure. Hope you found this helpful, and we'll keep doing it till we don't.